As award season comes swiftly around the bend towards all of us, I thought it would be appropriate to highlight a very notable film that should be re examined as nominees fall into place for the year. It's time to talk about A24's Warfare, so let's dive right into it. Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Morgan and I love movies. I love all movies, particularly war movies that are anti war, and this movie fits that bill, in my opinion, even if it does praise the courage of the men actually in the thick of it when it comes to various combat scenarios. There are standard war films, and then there's Warfare, A24's 2025 release that doesn't just depict combat, but immerses you in it with a potency that lingers long after the credits roll. Directed by Iraq War veteran Ray Mendoza alongside Alex Garland, this film strips away narrative artifice to deliver a stark, real time portrayal of Navy SEAL missions gone wrong. I should say this is a specific Navy SEAL mission that went catastrophically wrong. And it plays out, like I said, in real time. So you really feel immersed in the story in a way that not a lot of other films can really deliver. This movie is set during a 2006 operation in Iraq. Warfare places us right inside an apartment that is commandeered by a Navy SEAL squad, and we're not just observers as the audience, we're embedded with these guys. There are no sweeping backstories about any of them, there are no patriotic speeches, there are no heroic monologues. Instead, there is, sound, echoing gunfire, frantic radio chatter, ominous silence. And the performances also are, contribute to the atmosphere too. They're bare and they're raw. It's as if the screen itself becomes this very realistic battlefield. I think realism was a very specific, like, focal point for all of the creatives involved here, and that comes across really, really well. Let's talk about those performances though, because here the actors don't play characters. They really feel like they are just guys who happen to be in the military and happen to be in that house. Defero Wunatai, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He captures quiet tension and mounting dread very well. I'm really not familiar with a lot of his work, so I'll be following him more closely after this film. Will Poulter portrays, a character who is descending into desperation, and he's portrayed with an appropriate amount of gravitas. Will Poulter has become someone who I really like watching whenever he's in something. Cosmo Jarvis and Kit Connor also deliver subtly devastating portrayals of youth caught in relentless chaos. Other familiar faces are here too. We've got Joseph Quinn, Michael Gandolfini, Charles Melton. They too vanish into their roles. This isn't, fame or vanity in any way either for any of these guys. Every guy, every man gets his moment to shine. It's kind of a collective authenticity that holds you in place as an audience member, even as everything around this team of characters collapses. And, reviewers and audiences, I think, are in lockstep. They agreed that the cast disappears into these roles. They become believable as soldiers, as this team of guys, and that real strength of the film, I think, is a touchstone. I think the movie is a touchstone. I'm sure that we will go back in the years to come as each of these actors sees their various stars rise, and we'll be able to point to this movie as a time where all of them were in something together, and isn't that cool? That's already kind of happening with Joseph Quinn, for example. He steals scenes in the Fantastic Four First Steps. I think he's very good in that movie, and I'm sure we'll see it in years to come with actors like Charles Melton, who, obviously was already great in something like May December. People like Cosmo Jarvis, who are making waves in Shogun, things of that nature. You get what I mean. But what ultimately makes Warfare a uniquely different beast is the sound design, I think, too, which is nothing short of revelatory. It provokes something primal in the audience. I saw this back when it released in IMAX, and it was one of the most immersive and unsettling, in a good way, times at the theater in my recent memory. The sound hits you like shrapnel. Mendoza's vision, which is rooted in his own trauma, it dictates that every, thunderous bullet, every scream of these dudes, every whirring sort of burst of a bomb or of a tank driving by, it serves this, like, emotional memory. And it's not just mere spectacle for the sake of looking and sounding cool. It's trying to paint this story with a lot of realism. And I think that really comes through. Now, the why is a good question behind all of this kind of cruelty that we're seeing on screen. I'm trying to sort of talk around it as to not get, blacklisted or buried in the YouTube algorithm, but this is obviously a very violent film in a lot of ways. And why do we need to see that? Is it just sort of for the sake of spectacle and for the sake of shock factor? I don't think so. I think warfare is about stuff. I don't think it moralizes, but I don't think it's without things on its mind. It doesn't editorialize. It plays out like a forensic recording of this chaos in motion. And I think that helps the film overall. Critics affirm that the film delivers this forensic portrait of a combat scenario. It's not it doesn't employ any cliches. It doesn't have any overt, very on the nose political framing, although it's overt by the nature of it being about war. Um, what I mean is that nobody points to the screen or turns to the camera and says some sort of political message outright. You're left to kind of ingest the film on its own and come to your own conclusions. And that doesn't mean that the film is without things on its mind, by the way, or that it is not interested in politics as a rule. Um, it simply speaks for itself, and it allows the viewer to turn the piece of art over in their head and come to conclusions on their own. The horrors of war are on full display. I don't think it glorifies war in any way, even though it appreciates the people who go through these circumstances. And it's also clearly a very deeply personal film in many ways as well. It's built from Mendoza's own recollections, and his co writing with Garland imbues the narrative with precision and with an authenticity that only direct memory can provide. And so the movie functions like this sort of collective catharsis, not for audiences necessarily, but for the actual guys who lived it, who we see some blurred photos of over the credits. I guess maybe they didn't want their faces out there necessarily, just by virtue of the kind of sensitive material that the movie is depicting. And the movie is not just emotional or just uh, you know, mired in its own thoughts either. It's frankly it's accomplished cinema on a craft level too. This is a really kind of special movie that I wish more people were talking about, or that had lasted in the cultural conversation for a little bit longer. It had positive reception overall from audiences and critics, which is rare nowadays. It currently sits at a 78 on Metacritic at the time of this recording, which is not too shabby. Alex Garland's work has a tendency to be controversial or divisive, especially nowadays, which I actually quite enjoy about his sort of oeuvre. I admire that he always takes massive swings, whether it be with Ex Machina or Annihilation or Men or Warfare or the recent 28 Years Later, which he wrote, but he did not direct. If Alex Garland's name is on the film, it's never going to go in the direction that you expect when you first sit down in that theater with your popcorn. And I love him for that fact. I'm always my ears perk up when I see his name attached to something for that very reason. Because of that, though, I can also totally respect someone who sees warfare and despises it. Ultimately, this is not a movie for everybody. If you go searching for classic redemption arcs, triumphant crescendos, clear cut heroes, you're not going to find them here. And that's sort of the point. Warfare is about memory, these kind of broken expectations of these men. And the terror of the proximity that they are in to this chaos. It's a sensory experience. It's a percussive sort of nightmare, and it's kind of a relentless assault, especially if you're sitting there locked in your seat in a theater. But I do kind of mean that in a good way. It left a really really lasting impression on me. For those open to it, Warfare, I think it will be a landmark in war cinema that's worth seeing. It is technically very breathtaking, emotionally very harrowing in some points, even though we don't get a lot of backstories about the lives of these guys. You still connect with them. And, it's unforgettably human because of that. These are some really talented actors, like I said earlier. This is an interesting thing for A24 to have put out. It's brutal. It's kind of a testament to the people who go through this, and it's captured in the silence, the sound design, everything from the bullets to the screaming to the hurried breaths of the people, the horrified faces of these guys who can't escape their situation without enduring even more trauma than they're already, traumatized when we meet them. It's a really unique movie. And on my scale of A list, A amazing, A average, abysmal, and used to be A abolished, I'd give Warfare a nice, enthusiastic A amazing rating. I'm a big Garland fan, and this delivered one of my most unique experiences in theaters this year. The sound design, especially in IMAX, just really knocked my socks off. So I understand that some people kind of argue that the movie doesn't go far enough in condemning the Iraq war on the whole. While I can sympathize with that perspective and agree that the invasion of Iraq was pointless, I also fully acknowledge and respect that Mendoza and Garland, they never set out, I think, to make that kind of picture, meaning one where the message is spelled out in these massive kind of neon blinking letters. They clearly wanted to focus on the sensory experiences of the situation first and foremost, which I think definitely works. You can call it cowardice if you like, but I certainly did not walk out of the theater thinking that any of the creative people involved love violence or worship the military industrial complex. The focus seems to be on praising the people who come out of the horrors on the other side and weather this traumatic storm. I saved $18.49 on this ticket by using AMC A List at my local IMAX theater, which I say not because I'm sponsored by AMC, but because I want to tally my savings from A List at the end of a single year and tell you if the deal is actually worth it. And for me, it likely will be, as I go to the movies anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week as it is, but I'm still curious what that number ends up being. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you've seen Warfare, I'd love to hear what in the sound or the performances stayed with you the longest, if anything. Let's discuss below in the comments. Feel free to comment about this film or any other war movies that you like, or thoughts on Alex Garland as a filmmaker, or anything else that's on your mind. I try to respond as much as I can. Feel free also to like this video and or subscribe to the channel for my thoughts on other films as we head into award season. Thanks again, and stay safe until next time. Bye.